Colorado Territory, 1868. The sky blazed crimson as the sun sank behind the jagged peaks of the Rockies. Winter was coming, and with it, the bitter bite of frontier isolation that Hugh Harding knew all too well. At 26, he already commanded the largest cattle operation in the valley, 3,000 acres of prime grazing land, a herd that numbered in the hundreds, and a name that made men stand straighter when he entered a room. The locals called him the giant rancher, not just for his imposing height of 6 feet 4 inches, but for the shadow his success cast across the territory. Hugh dismounted from his stallion, his boots crunching on the frost-hardened ground of Clearwater Station. The small settlement had sprung up around the new railroad depot, bringing with it a trickle of eastern folk looking for a fresh start in the west. Hugh had no interest in newcomers. Newcomers meant trouble, land disputes, cattle thieves, and worse yet, the encroachment of civilization on the wild freedom he'd fought so hard to secure. Frontier wasn't made for settling, he muttered to himself as he tied his horse. And it sure as hell wasn't made for attachments. The trading post was unusually crowded with wagons parked outside. Another immigrant train had arrived. Hugh pushed his way through, nodding curtly to the townspeople who greeted him with reverent deference. At the counter, he unfolded a list of supplies. "Mr. Harding," Old Man Jenkins said, "your usual order will take some time. We've had an influx with the new settlers." Hugh's jaw tightened. "I ride 15 miles to town for supplies, Jenkins. I expect them ready." "I understand, but just get it done." Hugh turned away, scanning the crowded store with thinly veiled disdain. His gaze caught on an unfamiliar figure, a young woman struggling to lift a heavy sack of flour. She was small in stature, with generous curves straining against a simple blue calico dress that had seen better days. Her rounded face was flushed with exertion, and strands of honey-blonde hair had escaped her practical bun. Hugh watched as she failed twice more to hoist the sack. Something uncomfortably like sympathy stirred in him. Attachments were dangerous. Connections were liabilities. He'd learned that lesson watching his father drink himself to death after his mother's passing from mountain fever. He'd vowed then, at 16, that he would rely on no one but himself. And yet, he found himself striding across the store. "Allow me," he said, lifting the flour sack with one arm. The young woman startled, looking up at him with eyes the color of summer cornflowers. Her gaze widened as she took in his full height. "Oh, thank you, sir." Her voice carried the soft lilt of the Midwest. I would have managed eventually. Where do you want it?" Hugh asked, ignoring the curious stares of the other patrons. "Our wagon, the blue one outside. I'm Emma Montgomery. My family arrived yesterday from Iowa." She offered a small, gloved hand that disappeared entirely in his calloused grip. Hugh nodded and carried the flour outside, acutely aware of her following behind. At the wagon, he placed the sack inside and turned to leave without further conversation. "Wait," Emma called. "At least let me know your name, sir." "Hugh Harding." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "The rancher? Everyone's been talking about your cattle operation." "Is that so?" He didn't bother hiding his irritation. "Yes. They say you run the finest Hereford herd in 3 territories, but that you're—" She trailed off, blushing. "That I'm what, Miss Montgomery?" "That you prefer your cattle to people," she finished with unexpected directness. Hugh nearly smiled. "They're right. Good day." He turned to leave when a commotion erupted from the wagon next to theirs. A wheel had come loose, and a young boy was trapped beneath the tilting wagon bed. Without thinking, Hugh rushed forward, bracing his shoulder against the wagon's weight. "Get the boy out," he commanded, muscles straining against the crushing weight. Emma darted forward, pulling the frightened child to safety as others rushed to help. Once the boy was clear, Hugh stepped away, allowing the men to secure the wagon. "You saved my brother," Emma said, clutching the sobbing child. "Thank you, Mr. Harding." Hugh straightened his coat, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not with such strength," she said softly. "Please, let my family thank you properly. We're preparing dinner tonight at our camp just north of town. It's the least we can do." "That's not necessary." "I insist, Mr. Harding." Something in her steady gaze challenged him. "I may not look like much, but I've been told I'm the best cook in 3 counties back home." Hugh studied her, this soft, round woman so out of place in the harsh territory. "The frontier isn't kind to softness, Miss Montgomery." Perhaps the frontier needs a little softness, Mr. Harding. She stood straighter, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. Our camp. Sunset. I promise you won't regret it. Against his better judgment, Hugh found himself nodding before walking away, wondering what devil had possessed him to accept. As the sky deepened to purple, Hugh rode toward the settlers' camp, telling himself he was merely being courteous. The Montgomerys had set up on the edge of the settlement, 5 wagons arranged in a circle with a large fire at the center. He spotted Emma immediately, directing her family's activities with quiet authority. Mr. Harding, Emma's father, a weathered man with kind eyes, approached. I'm Joseph Montgomery. My wife, Sarah, and you've met Emma and little Thomas. We owe you a great debt. Hugh dismounted. No debt, Mr. Montgomery. Just happened to be there. Nevertheless, Joseph gestured toward the fire, where a large pot bubbled enticingly. Please join us. Emma approached, carrying a steaming plate. The delicious aroma of seasoned stew and fresh-baked bread made Hugh's stomach tighten, a stark contrast to the jerky and hardtack that constituted his usual meals. I hope you're hungry, she said, handing him a plate piled high with food. Hugh took a bite and couldn't suppress a sound of appreciation. The stew was rich and flavorful, the meat tender, the vegetables perfectly cooked. This is excellent, Miss Montgomery. She beamed. Thank you. I told you I could cook. As the meal progressed, Hugh learned the Montgomerys were planning to homestead a plot north of town, land that happened to border his own ranch. We've come to farm, Joseph explained. The railroad agent said this valley has fertile soil. It's also got harsh winters, summer droughts, and Indians who still raid occasionally, Hugh replied bluntly. Half the homesteaders who come here are gone by spring. We're aware of the challenges, Emma said, meeting his gaze steadily. But we've faced hardship before. After Mother died in '63, I kept our family fed through the worst of times. Emma has a way of making something from nothing, her father added proudly. Never met anyone who could stretch provisions like she can. Hugh nodded, studying Emma with new interest. Perhaps there was steel beneath that soft exterior after all. As he prepared to leave, Emma walked him to his horse. Thank you for coming, Mr. Harding. Thank you for the meal. She hesitated, then spoke quickly. Father doesn't know it yet, but our supplies won't last until our first harvest. I was wondering if there might be work at your ranch. I can cook, clean, mend. Hugh stiffened. He'd maintained his solitude fiercely, refusing to hire women for the ranch house. I don't need domestic help. Everyone needs good food, Mr. Harding, she said quietly. Even giants. Her persistence stirred something in him. Respect, perhaps. I'll think on it, he said finally, mounting his horse. As he rode away, Hugh cursed himself for his weakness. The last thing he needed was some settler girl disrupting the careful isolation he'd constructed. Yet he couldn't deny the simple pleasure of that meal, the first time in years he'd eaten food prepared by caring hands. 2 weeks later, during the season's first blizzard, Hugh was startled by pounding at his door. He opened it to find Emma Montgomery, half-frozen and desperate. Mr. Harding, she gasped, snow crusting her shawl. Please help. Father's very ill, and Thomas has taken a fever. Our supplies are low, and none of the town doctors will brave the storm. Hugh hesitated only briefly before grabbing his medical kit. My foreman's wife was a nurse. I learned a few things. They rode double through the blinding snow to the Montgomery homestead, a half-finished cabin with canvas still covering one wall. Inside, Joseph lay shivering beneath threadbare blankets, his breathing labored. The boy curled beside him, flushed with fever. Pneumonia, Hugh diagnosed grimly after examining Joseph. And the boy's got influenza. For the next 3 days, Hugh remained at the homestead, helping Emma tend to her family. He sent his ranch hand for medicines from town when the weather cleared enough for travel. Together, they fought through long nights, applying compresses, administering herbal remedies, and keeping the fire blazing against the mountain cold. On the 3rd night, as Emma dozed in a chair between the sickbeds, Hugh studied her face. At 20 years old, she carried responsibilities that would crush many men. Her hands were red and chapped from work, yet they moved with incredible tenderness when tending her family. There was a quiet dignity in her exhaustion that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. When Joseph's fever finally broke, Hugh knew it was time to return to his ranch. The weather had cleared, and he'd been away far too long. You saved their lives, Emma said as she walked him outside. How can we ever repay you? No need, Hugh replied gruffly. Neighbors help neighbors out here. That's all. Neighbors. A small smile lifted her lips. I thought you preferred solitude, Mr. Harding. He mounted his horse. Winter's going to be hard. If you need work, the offer stands. My cook quit last month. Position's open. Her eyes widened. Truly? You would hire me. 6 days a week. Sundays with your family. $2 a week plus room and board when you're there. I accept, she said immediately. When shall I start? When your father's strong enough to manage without you. Not before. As he rode away, Hugh told himself he'd made a practical decision. His ranch hands deserved decent meals. It had nothing to do with the way Emma's face had lit up with relief or how capable she'd proven herself during the crisis. Nothing at all. By early December, Emma had established herself at Harding Ranch, transforming the neglected ranch house into something resembling a home. Hugh's men, initially skeptical of their boss bringing a woman into their rough world, were won over by her cooking and unobtrusive efficiency. She arrived each Monday morning and departed Saturday evening, walking the 3 miles between the properties with quiet determination regardless of weather. Miss Montgomery, Hugh said one evening as she placed his dinner before him. I've noticed you walking in this weather. That's unnecessary. Take one of the spare horses when you go home. Emma paused. I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. It's common sense. She smiled then, a warm, genuine expression that made something in his chest twist. Thank you, Mr. Harding. As they settled into this new arrangement, Hugh found himself lingering at meals, engaging in conversation that had nothing to do with ranch business. He learned that Emma had been responsible for her family since she was 15, after her mother died giving birth to Thomas. She'd kept them fed through the war years when food was scarce, developing her cooking skills out of desperate necessity. I know I'm not what people expect to see out here, she said one evening as she kneaded dough for the next day's bread. Back home, the suitors stopped calling after Mother died. They wanted slender, dainty wives, not girls who looked like they enjoyed their own cooking too much. Hugh frowned. Those men were fools. She looked up, surprised. Oh, out here, practicality matters more than Eastern notions. A woman who can cook like you do is worth 10 who can't feed themselves. Emma laughed. How romantic, Mr. Harding. Are you suggesting my cooking makes up for my figure? Hugh felt heat rising in his face. I'm suggesting there's nothing wrong with your figure. It's healthy. Her hand stilled on the dough. That might be the kindest thing anyone's ever said about my appearance. Something in her voice made Hugh look up. The vulnerability in her expression struck him like a physical blow. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly see her, not as an employee or a neighbor, but as a woman. The soft curves of her body, the golden shine of her hair in the lamplight, the quiet grace in her movements. Your appearance needs no defending, Miss Montgomery, he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things, until Emma looked away, returning to her bread-making with pink cheeks. That night, lying alone in his bed, Hugh confronted an uncomfortable truth. Emma Montgomery was becoming important to him. And importance bred vulnerability. Vulnerability led to pain. He'd seen it destroy his father, seen it kill good men who couldn't bear the loss of those they loved in this unforgiving land. The frontier wasn't made for attachments. He'd lived by that creed for a decade. Yet he was beginning to wonder if he'd been wrong all along. As Christmas approached, tension grew in the territory. Reports of cattle rustling increased, and a gang led by the notorious outlaw Jackson Reed was rumored to be operating in the area. Hugh doubled the guards on his herd and warned Emma to be vigilant traveling between properties. One Wednesday evening, as snow fell in thick blankets outside, Emma approached Hugh's study with hesitation. Mr. Harding, might I speak with you? Hugh set aside his ledger. Of course. I've noticed your men seem concerned about these rustlers. She twisted her apron nervously. Father's worried too. Is there real danger? Hugh considered softening the truth, but decided against it. Reed's gang is dangerous. They've killed before, but they typically target large operations like mine, not small homesteaders. Emma nodded, but her expression remained troubled. The thing is, Mr. Harding, I've seen men watching our property. Twice now. Father thinks I'm being fanciful, but I know what I saw. Hugh stood immediately. What did they look like? When was this? Yesterday afternoon and again this morning. 2 riders on the ridge above our cabin. She described the men and their horses with surprising detail. Why didn't you tell me this morning when you arrived? I didn't want to seem like a frightened girl seeing shadows, she admitted. But then I overheard your foreman talking about cattle missing from the north pasture. Hugh grabbed his coat. I'm taking you home now, and I'm stationing men at your property tonight. But the snowstorm is precisely why I'm concerned. Reed likes to move during bad weather when visibility is poor. He placed his hands on her shoulders, surprised at how small she felt beneath his grasp. Emma, listen to me. If you see those riders again, you get inside immediately. Your family needs to be prepared to defend yourselves. The use of her given name wasn't lost on either of them. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded with determination. We will be. Father keeps his service rifle loaded. As they rode through the blizzard toward the Montgomery homestead, Hugh kept Emma pulled tight against his chest, shielding her from the worst of the wind. The proximity was unsettling, her soft warmth pressed against him, the scent of baking bread still clinging to her hair. At the cabin, Hugh explained the situation to Joseph, who looked grim but resolute. We've weathered storms before, both natural and man-made, the older man said. We'll be vigilant. Hugh stationed 2 of his most trusted hands nearby and reluctantly prepared to leave. Emma walked him to the door. Thank you for believing me, she said quietly. Most men would have dismissed my concerns. Most men are fools, Hugh replied. He hesitated, then added, Be safe, Emma. She reached out impulsively, squeezing his hand. You as well, Hugh. The sound of his name on her lips followed him into the storm. 2 days later, Hugh's worst fears were realized when Reed's gang struck in force. They hit the Montgomery homestead first, clearly intending to use it as a base to raid Hugh's cattle. Hugh and his men arrived to find the cabin surrounded, with Joseph Montgomery wounded and Emma and Thomas barricaded inside. The ensuing gunfight was fierce but brief, Hugh's superior numbers forcing the outlaws to retreat. As the dust settled, Hugh burst into the cabin to find Emma holding her father's hunting rifle with steady hands, Thomas protected behind her. Are you hurt? Hugh demanded, his voice rough with fear. Emma shook her head. Father's been shot in the shoulder. I managed to stop the bleeding. Hugh examined Joseph quickly. He needs a proper doctor. We need to get him to town. Those men, Emma said, her voice surprisingly steady. They knew you. Their leader, he called you by name, said this was personal. Hugh's expression darkened. Reed and I have history. He rustled cattle from my first small herd years back. I tracked him down and got them back. He swore he'd make me pay someday. So this attack, it was because of your connection to us? Emma's voice held no accusation, merely a search for understanding. Likely they were watching the ranch, saw you traveling between properties. Hugh ran a hand through his hair. I never should have offered you that job. I put your family at risk. No. Emma's voice was firm as she laid her rifle aside. You've been nothing but good to us. This is the work of evil men, not your doing. As they transported Joseph to town, Hugh's mind raced. Reed would return. This had been merely an opening move. The only way to protect Emma and her family would be to eliminate the threat entirely. The town doctor confirmed Joseph would recover, but needed weeks of rest. Hugh made arrangements for the Montgomerys to stay in town under the protection of his men while he dealt with Reed. You're going after them, aren't you? Emma asked when he visited that evening. Hugh nodded grimly. I've got no choice. They won't stop. There's always a choice, she said softly, placing her hand on his arm. You could let the territorial marshal handle this. The marshal is 3 days right away at best. Reed will have struck again by then. Emma studied his face. This isn't just about protecting us or your cattle. This is about your belief that you have to stand alone against every threat. Hugh stiffened. This is about doing what needs to be done. And if you're killed? What then? Her voice cracked slightly. Have you considered what that would mean to those who care about you? The implication hung in the air between them. Hugh found himself unable to look away from the emotion in her eyes. I've survived alone this long, he said finally. That's just it, Hugh. You don't have to be alone anymore. She stepped closer. Not if you don't want to be. Before he could respond, she rose on tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. Be careful, she whispered. Come back. The next morning, Hugh led a posse of his most trusted hands to track Reed's gang. The pursuit lasted 4 days, through mountain passes and frozen streams, until they finally cornered the outlaws in an abandoned mining camp. The ensuing shootout left 2 of Reed's men dead, and Reed himself wounded and captured. As Hugh bound the outlaws' hands, Reed sneered through bloodied teeth. "Should have known you'd come yourself, Harding. Always were too proud to ask for help." "It's not pride," Hugh replied. "It's responsibility." Reed laughed. "That fat little homesteader girl got you soft in the head. Never thought I'd see the day the giant rancher fell for a woman." Hugh's fist connected with Reed's jaw before he could think better of it. "Her name is Emma Montgomery," he said quietly, "and you'll not speak of her again." The journey back with the prisoners was long and cold, giving Hugh ample time to reflect on Emma's words and his own reactions. The truth he'd been avoiding crashed down upon him. He was falling in love with Emma Montgomery. More terrifying still was the possibility that she might feel the same way about him. Love was vulnerability. Vulnerability was weakness. Weakness got you killed on the frontier. And yet, the thought of returning to his solitary existence, of the ranch house without Emma's presence, felt more devastating than any danger Reed could have posed. When they reached town and delivered Reed to the sheriff, Hugh went straight to the doctor's house where the Montgomerys were staying. He found Emma sitting beside her father's bed, reading to Thomas. She looked up as he entered, her face lighting with relief. "You're safe," she breathed, rising to her feet. "And successful, by the look of it." "Reed's in custody," Hugh confirmed. "He won't threaten anyone again." Joseph, propped up in bed, extended his good hand. "We owe you our lives, Harding." Hugh shook his head as he clasped the older man's hand. "If anything, I put you in danger by bringing Emma into my business. The debt runs the other direction." "Nonsense," Joseph replied. "You've been nothing but good to my family." He glanced between Hugh and Emma with knowing eyes. "Perhaps you two should talk privately. Thomas and I were about to rest anyway." Outside in the doctor's small parlor, an awkward silence fell between them. Hugh struggled to find the right words for what he needed to say. "Emma, if you're planning to dismiss me from my position, I understand," she interrupted, wringing her hands. "After what happened, I'm sure you want to return to your solitary life without complications." Hugh blinked in surprise. "That's not what I was going to say at all." "Oh." A blush crept into her cheeks. "What then?" Hugh took a deep breath. "These past months, having you at the ranch, it's changed things. Changed me." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not good with words. Never have been." Emma took a step closer. "Then say it simply. I've lived by one rule since I was 16, that attachments are dangerous. That caring for people only leads to pain." He met her gaze directly. "When Reed attacked your homestead, I realized something. The pain of possibly losing you was far worse than any pain I'd been avoiding all these years." Emma's eyes widened. "Hugh, I know I've no right to ask. You deserve someone better, someone who didn't take so long to recognize what was right in front of him." But he swallowed hard. "I find I don't want to go back to living without you." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Emma Montgomery." The words, once spoken, seemed to take a weight from his chest. "I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you've brought life back to my home without my even realizing it was happening." She stepped forward, placing her hands against his chest. "When we first met, I thought you the most intimidating man I'd ever encountered. The giant rancher who preferred cattle to people." A soft laugh escaped her. "Then I saw how gently you cared for Thomas during his fever. How you worked alongside me without complaint. How you respected me when so many men have dismissed me." Hugh covered her hands with his own. "Does this mean—" "It means I love you too, Hugh Harding." Her smile was radiant through her tears. "Despite your stubbornness and your ridiculous notion that you're better off alone." Hugh pulled her into his arms, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "I was wrong about that. About so many things." "Does this mean I still have a position at the ranch?" she teased. "I was rather hoping you might consider a promotion," Hugh replied, his voice husky, "to a more permanent arrangement." Emma's eyes sparkled. "Are you proposing Mr. Harding?" "Inelegantly, perhaps." He took her hands in his. "Emma Montgomery, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to never again believe that I'm better off alone." "Yes," she whispered. "On one condition." "Name it." "That you never forget what brought us together in the first place." Her eyes danced with mischief. Hugh raised an eyebrow. "And what was that?" Emma stood on tiptoe and whispered in his ear that I may be too plump for some men's tastes, but I can cook like no one else in the territory. Hugh laughed and pulled her close. I wouldn't change a single thing about you, Emma. Not your cooking, not your courage, and certainly not your figure. With spring came new beginnings. The Montgomery's homestead was rebuilt with help from Hugh's ranch hands, though it would soon serve as a tenant farm rather than the family home. Emma and Hugh were married in the small church in Clearwater Station, with what seemed like the entire territory in attendance. Never thought I'd see the day, Hugh's foreman remarked at the celebration afterward. The giant rancher tamed at last. Not tamed, Hugh corrected, watching as Emma danced with her father, her white wedding dress swirling around her curves. Just no longer lost. As the sun set over the Rockies, casting long shadows across the land that had once seemed so empty to him, Hugh pulled his new wife away from the celebration. Happy? He asked, tucking a strand of honey-blonde hair behind her ear. Emma nodded, her eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. Happier than I ever thought possible. Are you? I spent 10 years believing the frontier was no place for love, Hugh said, drawing her close. You proved me wrong. This land isn't meant to be conquered alone. It's meant to be shared. Then we'll share it, Emma promised. Through winter blizzards and summer droughts, and whatever else comes our way. As they looked out over the valley that was now their shared home, Hugh felt a certainty he'd never known before. The false belief that had guided him for so long, that isolation meant safety, had been utterly transformed by the woman in his arms. In finding Emma, he had found not weakness, but a strength greater than anything he could have achieved alone. The frontier, he now understood, wasn't about surviving in solitude. It was about building something that would endure, a home, a family, a legacy. And with Emma by his side, the giant rancher had finally found the one thing his vast lands and herds could never provide, a place to belong.